Welcome back to B&H's industry interview series for NAB On Demand. If you want to learn more about color grading, today is your day. For the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be picking the brain of one of the industry's leading colorists, learning about how to bring professional color grading tools and techniques to a home post-production studio, responsible for the color on award-winning films, commercials, music videos from your favorite artists. I have the absolute pleasure to welcome Arianna Shining Star to stage with us. Arianna, thanks for joining us. So let's just jump right into it. Talk a little bit about your workflow. You get a job as a colorist on a production. Where does your job begin?
For me, as early as possible. Color correction is often, because it's one of the very last stages of the creative process, it every now and then will be, hey, we have something we need colored. Can we get in with you? Usually from a logistical schedule perspective, that also is less than ideal because managing so many projects at once, but I like to have the conversation as early as possible. So on feature films, television shows, especially, I'm working with the cinematographer and the director as early as pre-production, doing camera tests and lighting tests and talking about that end goal and the final look early on. I'm a big fan of as much as you can do practically, the better. So let's build those looks that we're interested in finessing in color as early as possible and make these lens choices, make these camera choices based on that end goal creatively. It often also means I'm building a custom LUT for the show and we're playing with different ideas creatively that will allow us to have the dailies viewed in a relatively general sense of what we're thinking about doing in the final grade. So as early as possible, I like to get involved in the conversation. And that's more of a, like, it's not just a technical conversation. I'm very much creative driven, creative story driven. So oftentimes really what that means is not just, you know, oh, what cameras are you considering because of resolution requirements for your delivery, or, you know, what lenses are you considering because of availability or because of, you know, this or that kind of end goal. It's often more also from a story perspective of what kind of story are we telling and what's the best way for us to put that on screen. So that conversation is often forest between the trees, kind of with the creative team, with the director and producers. That's kind of my way of getting involved at the outset. My hands are nowhere near the panels, so to speak, when I first get involved. It's never too soon.
And typically, towards post-production, how are the assets typically shared with you? Are they sending you a hard drive? Is it FTP?
Yeah, it kind of varies. For long form, definitely you got to get those drives. There's a lot of media that you're going to be shooting for a feature or for a television show. Short form, it does vary based on the project. You can sometimes upload it to an FCP or use a good old-fashioned hard drive as well.
And are you starting a new project file in your software of choice, or are you joining a collaborative project, say in Resolve or Adobe Premiere?
Yeah, I use Resolve, and every project begins as a fresh project. Not just from a technical standpoint, but I also take fresh eyes at it. I like to use each opportunity to be coloring, to approach the film in a way that it deserves a unique approach. So I don't have like a blueprint of like, okay, you're doing your music video approach, this is how you color music videos. Every project I come with a fresh perspective, considering the needs of the story, whether it's a narrative piece or a music video, commercial. You approach those in different ways from a color perspective, but not just from a technical basis. I kind of like to have a clean slate always starting out.
So you receive the assets, you review the footage, and you're ready to begin your color grade. What is the first thing that you do?
Watch it down. Watch down the final edit. I try and maintain a viewership perspective. I think one of the cool bonuses of being a colorist and having your colorist on the team is we come to the project with fresh eyes. More than any other part of the creative team, you know, I wasn't there during writing, I wasn't there during development at all. And If I'm lucky, I stop by on set once or twice. It's rare that happens, but I haven't been reviewing the edit over and over again. I really do what I can to preserve that viewership perspective, because it offers a unique perspective on the creative team. Oftentimes I'll be coloring like a comedy movie, and I'm like cracking up at the jokes as we're doing a watch down, and the whole team is like, it's still funny? Oh, cool, because I've heard this joke like 150 times, and for me it's not funny anymore, and I'm like, it's hilarious. But what that allows me to do is put myself in that viewership kind of mindset and offer what I think a viewer could really gain from the scene, from watching the scene. It's also kind of funny. Sometimes people will say things like, hey, do you notice that thing in the foreground? And I'll be like, the tree branch? And they're like, no, that's definitely a boom mic. And I was like, oh, like for me, like I wasn't there on set. I don't know where the tree might have been. It could have been a tree for all I know. So I try and keep that viewership perspective, and which means that the very first thing I like to do once I start out is watch down the final edit, because I try and avoid watching it as many times as possible. Like I want to watch it as few times as possible until I start grading.
Right. You want to maintain those fresh eyes, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one of the things, and just in my own experience with color grading, that I can relate to as well, or just video editing in general. Anytime that you look at something repeatedly over and over, you get exhausted, right? And everything just starts blending together. Colors start kind of turning to mud a little bit. And what are some ways that you try and kind of maintain keeping fresh eyes, aside from just not watching it repeatedly? Is controlling ambient light, for example, or the tone within the room?
Yeah, it's definitely good to keep a neutral environment. I think having ever so slight some ambient light, whether it's a bias light behind your monitor, can be a really good way of not actually just keeping some light in the room, but also it's really good for eye fatigue. So if you're spending, day in, day out grading back-to-back shows, especially if you're grading HDR, definitely want a bias light in there. But I would say that I just really try and watch the content as few times as possible before I begin grading. Once I'm grading, you watch it down as many times as you want. But, for example, I try and not go to the offline edit too many times, particularly for narrative work, because it really helps me lean into the story. Is this scene supposed to feel really, really somber? Like, how do we close in this character? And maybe we should make them more shrouded in shadow, and let's have that thing in the background fall off a little bit more, because as I'm watching it, I'm really drawn in this scene. So if I can lean into that intuition more, I find that my work shows up better on screen. I'm able to really enhance the story and enhance the photography to a whole different degree.
Now, does your color grade change based on the different types of video formats that you receive? Working with raw footage, or 8-bit or 10-bit, or compressed footage? What's your approach to these different formats?
Approach doesn't really differ. I would say that approach is more of sometimes it's more about how big is your sandbox to play in. If you've got really heavy lift, super high quality, really big files, and you've got the bit depth to really finesse range of tone, then you do get a bigger sandbox to play in. If something was shot on a more limited camera, or you were using some iPhone clips for something, then that definitely limits your range a little bit. But the approach wise is still, what can I do to elevate the story and celebrate the photography to the best of my ability. One thing that can be helpful when grading is having a bias light. It's something that you would basically just kind of put behind your monitor, and it allows you to avoid eye fatigue. So it's just kind of having a neutral light behind your grading monitor or behind your computer screen, if that's what you're grading on, and you're able to kind of offset the backlight of what you're working on.
Gotcha. So you control the ambient light a little bit more, so there's not so much contrast for your eyes to get exhausted by. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Now, kind of going back to the different video formats that you receive, working with RAW, for example, talking about a technical aspect of the workflow, are you altering, if you receive RAW footage or R3Ds, like, are you altering the master clip settings, or are you editing or color grading farther down the line on adjustment layers, for example?
Definitely the latter. I like to respect the photography, and those choices the DP made are very intentional and done for a reason. So I don't like to mess with the temperature or the tint or anything like that. I think that it's important to respect what was captured on set, unless there was a mistake, so to speak. But it's pretty rare that that's the case. I think it's good to just grade downstream, and it's nice that Red does offer that flexibility. But I will say I actually don't use it. I think that it, just like grading any ProRes footage or RE footage or Sony footage, MXFs, anything like that, where it's not a rastered codec and you're able to actually, and you don't have the ability to change the metadata. I don't find that limiting in any way, in the same regard that I don't find it beneficial to be able to manipulate that metadata.
And is there any particular video format that you prefer to work with?
No, whatever offers me the highest quality, camera information. Oftentimes, particularly for short form, that means working off of ProRes built from the camera files. As long as the bit depth is maintained through the offline edit, and whether it's swapping out the proxies for the camera files, as long as it's not, again, a rastered codec like R3V, then you're able to maintain the color fidelity of a ProRes clip. You, of course, want to make sure you don't truncate the metadata and limit the bit depth of that camera file when you're exporting your ProRes. But one thing that definitely affords in workflow is, particularly for working remotely right now, is really easy file transfer. So that's something where if you captured RE footage at ProRes, and you swap on your edit timeline from the proxies to the camera raw ProRes files, if you maintain color fidelity throughout and you're working off of a log C image, and you remove all your LUTs, any color effects, things like that might be on your edit timeline, then you kick out a ProRes sequence, and as long as you've got the same ProRes 444 as was captured, then it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and you're not sacrificing the quality. Quality is always most important to me. So I always kind of joke, I'd rather do it the hard way if it's going to improve the end product, but why do it the hard way if it's not going to improve the image at the end game?
Now let's talk color management a little bit since we're on the topic. Walk us through your general process for color management, as basic or as technical as you want to get. I know a lot of people probably are trying to maintain color fidelity with limited equipment, right? At home, with their own home studio. Just give us a brief on what your process for color management is.
Yeah, well, from a color space standpoint, you definitely want to maintain if you're capturing, say, if you're using RE and you're capturing a log C image, you want to maintain that log C space through grading, and that way you can actually maximize the quality of the camera file that was captured. Then you're outputting for a standard Rec. 709, which is your average computer, phone, TV monitor. And you want to kind of maintain that without messing with it too much.
Now, how important is having an external monitor to color grade on? And then the follow-up question to that is, how important is the quality of that monitor? I'm sure at your studio you have high-end production monitors with Rec. 709 color space and probably a lot more technical things that allow you to do your job the best way. But getting off of the MacBook screen, for example, and color grading on an external screen, walk us through that a little bit and the importance of the quality of monitor.
I think it's what you're viewing your material on is important. However, in the same sense that you go to a sports bar, monitors tend to change. put any colorist in a sports bar, I'll go a little mad because every TV is different and drives me a little insane. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but at the same time, I think my best advice for at least when you're grading and trying to get, dial in what your final product is to take a look on a couple good solid screens. Apple does a really great job both with iPhones and iMacs of keeping color managed like images, more so than other computer companies. As far as having like a proper color accurate monitor, I think that there's some pretty good consumer based models. I grade on the Sony X300, which is a really solid monitor that also allows me to grade in HDR. But anything that is a standard 100 nit, which is like your average, again, computer, TV screen is 100 nits of brightness. That's like steps of brightness. So you think of HDR there's a lot of different, flavors of HDR, but HDR is whether it's 1,000 nits, so it's 10 times brighter than your average computer screen or your average monitor, or even the Pulsar is 4,000 nits, just a lot of steps of brightness. I would just say that working off of a standard computer monitor is not too shabby. Make sure that brightness isn't turned too high up, though. I would keep it around half. That's my hot tip.
Now, one of the things I notice about the work that you do is that you have a beautiful way of capturing skin tones, I think. What's your process for receiving the footage and making sure that you maintain some truth to the skin tones and maintaining that balance?
I would say not dissimilar from my approach when I'm painting. I love to paint as a hobby, and in a similar way of when I'm grading food, I try and make the food look delicious. And you try and make the skin tones look healthy. Everyone's skin tone has different like undertones. And so you kind of try and look at each person uniquely. And if they feel healthy, then you're good to go. If they feel more sallow or sickly, maybe that's a story choice. Grading a film recently where we wanted the main character to always feel a little bit ill, and it was a subtle change that we did throughout the film, just to make that main character, his skin had kind of a greenish, almost like there was a fluorescent light on him, just that he never quite felt healthy, and that was a way for us to externalize his character. And he wasn't really healthy in the head either. He had some mental issues. So it was a good way for us to externalize that character a little bit, and put it on screen.
And are you doing this through isolating specific wavelengths of color or through color masking, for example?
It depends, but I always want the individual to feel informed by their environment. So for example, if somebody is under a really harsh green light, their skin is going to have a greener cast, and maybe you want to counteract that slightly just to bring out a little bit more of their skin tone. But you also want it to be informed by where they're sitting in their space, and have that feel natural. Otherwise, it will feel like a jump. The irony is like, somebody doesn't have this neon green Shrek skin tone, but if they're under, a cool Fight Club green light, then you want it to be informed narratively and have them feel at home in their environment.
Yeah. Now, when you create a look for a scene, do you generally keep that grade for the whole scene, or could it change if the lighting changes during a shot?
Definitely.
In Ibiza, for example, there's a scene where they turn off the room lights and turn on a black light. Are there two separate grades for those two different lighting scenarios?
There are, yeah. There's a specific shot where you're referring to where she turns off the lights, and in the same take, there is a lighting change. And sometimes I'm asked, what's the difference between color correction and color grading? And I always kind of say, there's definitely a difference, but it's more my way of joking that the terms are used really interchangeably. But the way I like to think about it is, in every project you're working on, part of my role is color correction and part of it is color grading. Correction would be the things that didn't quite go as planned on set, or if you're shooting a scene outside and the sun has moved over the span of those 5 hours, but during the edit, this scene is supposed to only take 5 minutes of time for the viewer. Part of my job is to make that feel really seamless and feel like it genuinely did only take 5 minutes, even though the sun is a completely different place in the sky. Part of that is the correction, but the grading is really the story part, and the where you get to lean into the creative, and those two really go hand in hand. I think on every project, big or small, you have a little of the correction and a little of the grading. And the proportions may differ based on the environment, the shooting conditions. Documentary work tends to be a little heavier on the correction because you can't plan ahead in the same way. You're not setting up lighting in the same way. But for example, for that shot in Ibiza, there is a dynamic in the color grade there where during that shot, the grade does change once that light is hit, and whether you kind of go frame by frame, and if the light clicks on a specific frame, the dynamic happens right then and there. It's a static keyframe. If it does take a few frames to change, I'll time it out so that it feels really seamless. And then you want to watch it through a bunch of times and make sure that cut feels like you see it change, but it feels motivated by their space. You kind of want to hide it when you're going to adjust the grade in that way. A little trick up your sleeve.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk saturation, for example. How much color is too much color? How heavy in a typical scenario do you lean on that saturation slider one way or the other?
I lean pretty heavy on it when given the green light. I think that some of the best creative work comes from when you look at your collaborators as teammates, not just for doing the job and completing the task, but also looking for like pushing each other. I love when I'm challenged in the color suite, and when I'm asked to like do something really unique and color outside the lines. Music videos afford you to do this more so than other formats. We certainly did that a lot in Ibiza and broke a lot of rules and had a lot of fun doing that. Another project though that comes to mind is this Rihanna music video. The song is called Wild Thoughts. Well, we kept joking that it was a wild grade for Wild Thoughts, and it's wild. We leaned really heavy on the saturation. We definitely broke some things, and I think it ended up creating definitely a unique look, but I credit the creative team for giving me a really long leash and being hyper creative and coming up with something really unique. And saturation, definitely, that's a big one there. It's a highly saturated, very colorful music video. Very big sandbox for me to play in, that's for sure.
So now adding texture to the final color grade, as you did in Cardi B's Press music video, for example. When do you add texture? When is it appropriate to do so?
I think that sometimes it's really fun to play with different textures, and that's definitely a part of grading that I lean into, whether it's even a subtle artifact kind of layer. There's a cool Converse campaign that I did where it's like Zayn Malik like running around New York, and we overlaid like head and tail leaders and really cool like textures, and some of them are on super low opacity where you think maybe it was just practically captured, and some of it is like that's obviously an overlay, and it was a kind of my way of partnering with the edit, because the editor, she did a fantastic job on that campaign, and it's super frenetic. There's tons of energy, and I really wanted to take it further in the grade, and adding color alone wasn't taking it there. We had to elevate it even further and add a ton of texture to that whole campaign. But for music videos too, I mean, I think that there's oftentimes or features or commercials, sometimes just having a little bit of a background texture, whether it's just adding a little bit of 35mm grain. Often it can be as subtle as, as you don't quite see it there, or a little more in your face. It kind of depends on the content, but also, forgetting overlays and actually leaning into texture of the footage itself. Like for Cardi's video, there's some awesome overhead shots that the director has in there that we're looking at tons of naked women. You gotta check out the video. I'm like, this is like the ultimate tease if you haven't seen it. There's tons of naked women laying on pavement, and we really wanted their skin to be super, super smooth, but have the pavement be really, really gritty. And so we leaned into the texture of the pavement while also doing a lot of nice skin softening and smoothing work on them. and a lot of them they're like dead in the video, and so they've got like blood on them, and you kind of zooming through a bunch of different close-ups, and really wanted their like kind of wounds to be really like gross and lean into the texture of it. And so that's a fun opportunity on that video. You also, texture is definitely an important part of commercial work as well. You want a car to be super polished and sleek. You maybe want, you know, your hamburger bun to really feel each of those sesame seeds, and part of that is the grade, and in finding the things that our eye draws to. It's often a game of psychology of where your eye is brought, whether it's the sharpest thing in the frame, the brightest thing in the frame. Playing with texture is a great way of kind of directing focus.
So obviously there's so many tools available to use as a colorist. Saturation, contrast, texture, hues, you can push everything and pull it. When do you know that you're finally done with a color grade?
So tough. I think to be a colorist, you have to be a perfectionist by nature, and to be a perfectionist by nature, you always feel like there's still more to do. Knowing when you're done is definitely a learning curve. I think that especially when I was starting out, it felt like it was like impossible to ever figure out, like, am I done? I don't know. I think that now, after grading and enough shots and enough projects to know when the pencil should be put down, sometimes we'll be watching something down, and every time I watch a piece of content, like when we're kind of reviewing it start to finish, and like, you know, we've done a bunch of work on a scene and then go, all right, let's watch it down. I try and direct my eye to different things. So the first time I'm just kind of watching it generally. I'm not trying to tell my eye to look at one thing or another. After I've kind of generally looked at it, we've polished it up, nothing's catching my eye, then I kind of start giving myself homework assignments, so to speak. Like, okay, now you're gonna look at all the faces. Now you're gonna look at all the backgrounds. Maybe there's a window, you know, this bright window. If the light changes throughout the scene, maybe I need to look at that window and make sure the window is really consistent throughout. Or if we don't want it to be consistent, maybe make sure that the change is really gradual and feels like it's a natural evolution. So I kind of give myself little homework assignments. And at a certain point, you know, my hands run out of things to do and there's nothing catching my eye. Perception is definitely varies person to person though. So I think it's valuable to have different eyes in the room, or working remotely, different eyes looking at the content, and different people will see different things. It's my job to see as much as possible. And I am often able to kind of be, again, that viewership perspective. People will be like, you know, we'll talk in the color grade in the room and say, hey, did anyone else, did that shot bump anyone else for any reason? And if somebody else is like, yeah, actually, and then like, it's like, you know, maybe we should look at that. Like, let's figure out together what's catching your eye. It doesn't catch my eye, but there could be something that you might be seeing that my eye doesn't naturally go to. As a colorist, of course, I try and I want my eye to be caught on anything that should be caught on, but it can be valuable to have different sets of eyes in the room.
So obviously, as a colorist, it's relatively normal to work in a remote environment. Over the past 6 months, still, I'm sure a lot of that has changed for you. What is it like working unsupervised? What do you love most about it? And do you have any advice for anybody who's new to this and has a hard time adjusting?
Yeah, definitely. Working unsupervised is, like you said, a variety of projects that I work on. I'm working on unsupervised in an unsupervised capacity. Particularly for narrative, you know, the creative team will come in, we'll set a look together. I'll spend some time unsupervised. People will come in for reviews, and so that's definitely, like you said, a part of the process normally, but more so obviously now than ever. Been working unsupervised all the time. One thing that I do think though, we can really benefit from this time of kind of being forced to work unsupervised I'm seeing a lot of creatives start to get really much more comfortable than ever before with that process. And that, I think, is going to be a huge benefit towards post-pandemic time. It's so common that all the creatives that are a part of a project and really ought to have their eyes on the color grade and give their feedback can't be in the room at once. It's really common that cinematographer is off on their next shoot, or the director has to go and scout or do pickup shots, things like that. And being able to review remotely is something that's really valuable. While there is, I won't say that it's the same as working side by side. We don't get to enjoy a cocktail together and hang out. And, I always kind of joke that color sessions are mostly hanging out social time while I color, and then people give feedback as I'm coloring. I talk and color all the time. And so it's a part of you kind of miss that fun aspect, but it's really valuable to be able to have the technology to, whether it's do virtuals or and virtual sessions where we're actually still grading live together, or do kind of reviews. I think that if, the next best thing to being actually fully in the room and present together is doing a virtual session where we're streaming the material and we get to still grade live together. One thing that sets color correction apart from every other aspect of the industry is the immediacy of it. From writing to lighting to editorial, so many other aspects of the industry, there's kind of a time lapse from when an idea is conceived to when you actually get to see it on paper or on screen. And for color grading, because it is so quick in how fast you're able to incorporate feedback, I could be grading, you could say, let's make this whole scene darker, boom, in 20 seconds the whole scene is darker. It doesn't take me long, and then we can look at it and go, actually maybe now it's too dark, let's cut that in between and go a little bit in between. Leaning into that intuition is one of the best parts for me about color grading, and you still get that working remotely together if it's in a virtual, where you get to experiment and try things. The difference really lies between if you're working fully unsupervised and I'm sending screeners for review, we still get to have those brainstorming conversations, but you remove the immediacy of it, of like, let me try something and tell me what you think about how it works. And if it doesn't work, then let's try something different. And that can be a really fun part of color grading, but you're still able, we work remotely and fully unsupervised all the time. We're still able to explore different options together. And I'm really excited to see how that comfort level will maintain past pandemic time, because I think that there's really a lot to be gained with having more creatives give their thoughts remotely and feel comfortable that their footage is in good hands. Of course, that comes down to also working with a creative team that you know and trust. But there's a lot to be gained with working unsupervised. And I think that I've really seen so many more people get super confident in that process, which has been great. I've been confident for a long time in the unsupervised process, but it's easy to say when you're the one with the hands on the wheel.
Now tell us a little bit about your coloring setup right now. What is essential, and is there anything that you recently discovered that has enhanced your workflow?
Blackmagic, DaVinci Resolve advanced panels allow me to get the most finessed, subtle details. It's not just about efficiency, it's about really being able to have the controls to super fine tune things. That makes a big difference. Having a really good solid monitor, I love the Sony X300 is my favorite. And that again allows me to see subtle nuanced differences in details. And your footage is never under a more intense microscope than it is in the color suite. So it's I want to be the one to catch anything that anybody possibly could catch. Past that, a good cup of coffee.
And I mean, obviously this is a relatively graphic intensive medium. Is there much thought or effort that needs to be put into a specific computer system or graphic card?
Definitely if you're working with really heavy lifting footage, if you're working with a lot of VFX footage, if you have XR files or really high resolution red footage, and you're actually, trying to grade the R3Ds as opposed to just doing offline edit, it's important to have a computer that can keep you up to speed. I think again, with that immediacy of leaning into, experimenting and finding yourself in that flow state where you've lost your sense of time a little bit and you can really get into the creative. You never want technology to be in your way. So if your computer can't keep up with you, then it's not just limiting you in, when you're done working or when how much you can get done in a certain period of time, but it also limits you creatively because you you can't really, you know, you're swimming with weights on your legs a little bit.
Let's say somebody is just getting started color grading. They've got minimal equipment at home, maybe a MacBook, and they're editing in Adobe Premiere or the free version of DaVinci Resolve. Let's say they have a bit of money to start investing into color grading tools. What are the first few things you would recommend that they purchase?
I actually think that having some panels of some kind would be valuable. Blackmagic offers a few different versions of kind of mini panels. There's others on the market as well, but I definitely recommend the Blackmagic ones. They're great for on-set grading as well. But having actual color wheels as opposed to using your keyboard and mouse definitely makes a big difference. Those are the first things that that I would recommend, is the wheels specifically. Past that, the other keystrokes of the panels definitely are valuable, but being able to finesse luminance and color tone with wheels allows you to do things with a lot more delicate of a touch and find kind of that perfect tone that you're looking for.
And the next step, if we had an ideal home setup, money not a barrier of entry here, what does that ideal home studio look like in terms of monitors? I know a lot of people like to color grade on projectors. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think for theatrical, it's good. You definitely want to see things projected. When I'm grading a movie, especially more now than 5 years ago, we're looking at material on glass because so much is going straight to Netflix or to Hulu. When we worked on Ibiza, that was the first movie that Netflix mastered in HDR first, and we actually did the HDR version as our hero version. Typically before that, almost every movie started with the theatrical pass, which is in P3 color space. And then they'd go to do the video version, which would be Rec 709. And so you basically would color grade the entire film projected and master it for theaters. And then the color gamut is slightly, is altered and slightly smaller with Rec 709. So then you would do the second version with that video grade. And then you'd also do the HDR pass at that point, where you're actually, you're taking kind of those 100 nits of brightness and making it 1,000, or if you're working off the Pulsar monitor, which is a really specific monitor that allows you to get to 4,000 nits. We would do those after the fact, but that was kind of counterintuitive because you're basically taking a really small container and then trying to kind of expand it, as opposed to maximizing the technology and kind of narrowing down streams. So when we were first having these conversations as production was wrapping up for Ibiza about how we were going to approach the color grade, mastering in HDR was something that I had asked and said, hey, like, what are your guys' thoughts on kind of blazing the trail with me? I think that we should master this first in HDR and then downstream do the theatrical trim and the video grade. Especially for a Netflix film, a few people saw it in theaters. We had a wonderful premiere in theaters, and there were a couple other screenings, things like that, but really wanted to make sure that the general public was viewing it in its best possible format. And so mastering it in HDR on glass made a lot of sense for that film. Now, I'm a big fan of any time technology is going to forward storytelling. So you always want technology to be helping you with that end goal. At the end of the day, we're all creators, we're all storytellers, and HDR has the ability of definitely forwarding the story particularly for certain types of content. For Ibiza, for example, so much of the movie takes place in clubs, and we really got to go totally hog wild with the brights and the highlights in that film and make it feel so immersive from a viewership perspective. You really feel like you're in a club in Ibiza and when you're watching this film in HDR. So it was important for us to master it in HDR and have that be the hero pass. And then kind of later downstream, we did the video grade and the theatrical trims.
Now, when you have multiple color grades for different color spaces in a production, Is it as easy as mastering an HDR and then just kind of putting a LUT, or just is it an easy transition between your master, like going from HDR to Rec 709, or do you have to start from scratch and do a completely custom color grade?
It is a pretty seamless transition. Dolby is done an incredible job with how they've developed the algorithms that actually do a translation. So it'll basically say, oh, your scene when you're grading HDR is in this container and you want to map it to this container. So we're going to have it steadily kind of smooth off. So it's not just like a hard clamp. So you picture something, for example, if I'm grading a film that is in HDR and there's a really bright sky, but then when we look at it in SDR, the standard dynamic range, which is just the standard Rec 709, the sky looks like this window. And that is something that we may need to, at that point, when I'm doing the Rec 709 grade, go in and specifically make an adjustment to the sky. But the rest of the image will be kind of naturally smoothed out to be safely maintained in the container of the new working color space.
Thank you so much for all the information, Arianna. It's really a pleasure to have you. Tell us a little bit about, do you have any plans for any next projects coming up?
Oh yeah, all kinds of goodies cooking up right now. Got some great shows that I've been working on that'll be coming to Netflix pretty soon, and some films as well, so stay tuned.
And where can the viewers stay in contact with you?
Instagram. Instagram is the best. I've met so many amazing collaborators, whether, it's I'm posting at the ASC house and I'm like, hey, I'm here like for the ASC awards. And then somebody is at the bar and they're like, you're Arianna, we've worked together, but I've always been off shooting. Like, thank you so much for being, my colorist on some stuff. And so Instagram is a cool way of connecting people. I'm a big fan. It's just Arianna Shining Star is the handle. 2 N's in Arianna.
You heard it here first. Please follow Arianna Shining Star on Instagram to keep up with her. Arianna, that's a really interesting name. Where does Shining Star come from, by the way?
Hippie parents. What can you do? They met at a Grateful Dead show during the song Shining Star, and decided to make it my middle name. So it is legally my name. It's on my birth certificate and everything.
That's such a beautiful story. Yeah, my brother's name is Orion, and I'm Oliver, and same thing. Everybody's like, these are really unique names, and my excuse is always hippie parents.
Hippie parents. What can you do? Love them.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. It was
absolutely
awesome to have you, and stay tuned for the next series. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.